Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video, and you are looking at the Reate iron. Going to be my full review and discussion on this very, very beautiful, very well put together Reate knife. This did come from White Mountain Knives, so go ahead and use my discount code Sharp Stuff. And I can't promise that Justin will have any of these in stock. These have been very, very difficult to get. And actually, I'll give you some background there. So this design came out quite a little bit ago. I think Terra Fanatic was the first one I saw talk about it, and I've been pretty excited about it since the first one I saw. However, these have been rather hard to get. And in fact, I emailed Justin, I emailed a couple of different people trying to find one, and they were just not widely available, and they're still not, but they are beautiful. So I was pretty stoked to try and get my hand, pretty motivated, I guess, to try and get my hands on one. Now, I will say this, I didn't like every single variation. There have been a number of variations available. Some of them had kind of weird anno colors on the hardware. Some of them were, anyway, all I'll say is I didn't like every single version of this. There was a thumb stud version as well, and some of the thumb stud's kind of a strange shape, and there were some that were kind of weird colors. So because of all that, there were only a few variations of this that I was interested in, and luckily Justin had one and I was able to pick it up. Okay, so I'll just kind of warn you. I say that because if you're watching this and you really like this, or you start looking for one of these, it might be a bit of a challenge, number one, to find one at all, and number two, to find the particular one that you like. So you've been warned. If you do go over to White Mountain Knives, make sure you use my discount code. You'll save yourself a bit of money there, 10%, and that discount code is, once again, Sharp Stuff. Okay, size and weight on this is 7 and 9/16 overall, so that's, just a little over 7.5 inches, which is smaller than I generally enjoy, but in this case, I like this design so much I was willing to sort of take a chance on this. The blade is 3¼ inches overall. 4¼ on the handle. Now, that's not a huge handle, but the grip area is still 3¾ which is quite nice. And this guy's going to weigh in at 4.7 ounces, which is not, I mean, it's a little hefty for its size, making it a pretty dense knife, but 4.7 ounces is not a big deal in terms of, weight in pocket. It's not anything worth really saying a whole lot about. I will say this, the grip area is substantial, so I can get a nice full grip on this, and I can choke up as well. Now, I would say this is probably not meant to be a finger choil, but it's big enough that it does the job. All right, so that size and weight, generally a little small for me, but I know some of you are, some of you like those smaller knives, and so this may be extremely appealing to you. And for others, maybe you'll just be like me and understand that even though it's kind of small, it's hand-filling enough and substantial enough that it doesn't feel like a small knife, if that makes any sense. All right, let's go ahead and get a look at this blade. I really, really like this blade. So M390 steel, multi-directional grinder satin finish. Look at those grind lines, and Reate does kill it when it comes to blade grinds. They do a phenomenal job, and this one is no exception. It's nice and thin behind the edge. It cuts very nicely. You can see the point on this is sort of an exaggerated drop point. It's kind of below the center line, which may be off-putting to some people, but I think it fits well with this design, and overall I find this to be pretty nice. Now, I will say two very quick things about this blade. These are sort of wishes on my part more than true criticisms, because the fact is, as this blade stands, it looks absolutely gorgeous and it functions extremely well. However, I'm still going to complain. I'm a reviewer, guys. What would I be if I didn't complain a little bit? So I'd like to see a hollow grind here. In my mind, I can just imagine this knife with a hollow grind, and it's just a dream come true. Now, I can also imagine this with a blade length of about an extra, 3/8 of an inch here. And again, it would be fantastic. So Reate, if you're watching this and you ever decide to do a second iteration of this knife, a slightly larger version would be amazing, and a hollow grind would just be off the charts. Overall, again, I love this knife and I love this blade. So don't take those wishes as true criticisms because they're really unfair. The blade functions very well and it looks beautiful. So it's not really fair of me to criticize that way. It's just me kind of putting my own personal preference on this knife. All right, now moving on to the action. No surprise, this is a Reate knife and it's a flipper. And have you ever known Reate to do a bad job with their action? So we've got a ball bearing pivot here, ceramic bearings, and it really, really is nice and smooth. They have done a detent ramp, and if you don't know what that is, that means here on the front of the lock bar on the face there's just a little indentation to allow the detent ball to get up onto the tang of the knife a little easier. All right, and then it can slide closed. Now this does do the thing that a lot of knives with detent ramps do. I'll see if I can open it to the point that it's on the ramp. There you go. So see how it kind of pushes it open a little bit, and that's because you've got the detent ball applying pressure on this angled ramp, and so essentially it just pushes the blade over. All right, so it does do that a little bit. Honestly, from day-to-day use, you don't really notice it. It is one thing that I will say, if this was a knife where you couldn't get the detent ball off the lock face before moving your finger out of the way, then that would be a real problem. But because of the way this is designed, it's not really an issue. The flipper tab is very comfortable. The lock bar is very accessible. Of course, no big surprise, it does have a stainless steel lock bar insert, so some good longevity and very, very solid lockup there. So lockup and deployment, or action for short, is very, very nice. And look, is anyone surprised by that? It's a Reate with fantastic action, like practically every other Reate that's out there. So no big surprise in that department. Everything is pretty comfortable and reliable. I will say this. This is a knife, I like this design so much that I kind of wish they'd gone a little extra above and beyond and gone dual row ceramic bearings here instead of single. Again, it's not a criticism, it's not a fair criticism because the action is fantastic. It's a bit of an unfair criticism because I prefer that design over what they've gone with. All right, now let's go on to, we've talked about the blade, we've talked about the action. Let's talk about this handle just a little bit. Now this one happens to be, and I guess I should say before moving on, this is available with thumb studs. So I'm talking about the action as it applies to this knife when done with a flipper tab. Thumb studs may be a little bit different. Let's go ahead though and look at this handle. And I've got to say, guys, this is absolutely beautiful. This micarta is so cleanly inlaid, you can hardly feel, the texture is different, so you can feel a difference, but it's just so clean, and the fit and finish is so nicely done. The way they've done this also is pretty interesting. So they take away all of this material, all right, then they do an inlay of the micarta, and then another inlay inside of that to do this piece of titanium here. Now, thinking of inlay and talking about this micarta, I love it as much as I love, look at the ano on that hardware. Absolutely beautiful, guys. That is so cool. Turning it over, you can see, it's just kind of multifaceted and absolutely pops. Love, love, love that. The one thing I don't love about this handle design is the way they've done this milling. It's not bad. And I think as I stand here and look at the knife like this, I'm not disappointed. I still like it, but I can again imagine a knife that had micarta right here. So had they just done one piece of micarta and then left the bottom plane, I feel like it would have tied the design together a little more nicely and made it just a little more balanced. Either that or just gone with a straight plain tie side. One of those two things I think would have been a little nicer. The milling that they did is okay, and now that I have it in person, when I first saw this, I really hesitated because this milling really threw me off. Having the knife in person, it's actually very nice and it looks great. And so I can't, again, it's another one of these theoretical criticisms where I can imagine the knife being slightly different and I feel like perhaps it would be a little better, but as it stands, it's already fantastic. So it's a very, very slight criticism, if you can even call it that. Thinking of the handle, it's important that we touch on ergonomics here. And I will say this is a very comfortable knife in hand. It works great in a saber grip. Hammer grip, it's not as good. Reverse grip, for, I don't know, those imaginary scenarios where someone's going to use a reverse grip, it's okay. But in a saber grip, it's very nice, and it's even nicer when you choke up and use that little choil to get your index finger in there. So ergonomics is great. Overall build and design is great. There are a couple little things that I kind of wish for, but it's fine as it stands. All right, now let me sort of reiterate here before we get to the comparisons. Every part of this knife has like this one minor tweak I would like to see. So overall, I would like to see it just a little bit bigger. I'd like to see a hollow grind, and I'd like to see the micarta carried over to the other side. And then I did mention as well that dual row ceramic bearing would be very, very welcome here. As it stands, without having those little things that I wish for, this is still a beautiful knife. It's exceptionally well built. The design, I think, as it sits here, I think this is a piece of artwork. It's beautiful. The anodization is so nicely done. The grind lines are so nicely done. The micarta is just feels great in hand. So I really, really am very, very impressed with what Reate has done here. So thinking of that, let's get to some comparisons. I've got a couple here that I think are worth bringing in. Other knives that I love. Here's a knife that's on the smaller side, still an overseas produced knife. This, of course, is the We Knives Malice with a flame ano. Again, beautiful knife, well put together, highly enjoyable, a little bit bigger, and I can imagine the iron being the same size as this and being sort of really, really exceptional at that point. As it stands, still fantastic. If you want something kind of similar but just a little bigger, the Malice might be a good option for you. Another Reate knife here. You guys know this is one of my favorite knives of all time. This is the Reate Knives Torrent. Lots of similar stuff here. Anodized hardware, great grind lines on this blade. Again, it is a bigger knife, and this does have dual row ceramic bearings, which I really, really enjoy. This might be something to look at if you are, you want something a little bigger. And you can, the nice thing about the Torrent is you can find these at a pretty reasonable price point. As always, if you want something that is not going to break the bank, but it's going to have absolutely superb action, Civivi is a great option. So yeah, the nice thing about Civivis is you get action. Is the action on this as nice as this? Well, no. Okay, but it is still very, very well done. And I like to throw something like this in here. Whenever I talk about something that's really high end, it's nice to contrast it with something a little more budget friendly that gives you some of the same features or enjoyment or something like that. While we're doing comparisons, here's a couple more titanium frame locks. This is the WE 037. Really, really interesting knife. I'm not going to go into all these details, so I've brought it up many, many times. A couple things that I think most of you will be familiar with. Here, of course, is the Chris Reeve knives in Cosi. This one, of course, with the Tanto blade. What else have we got here? Here is the XM18. Similar, these two knives kind of remind me of each other, even though they're quite different. They do have a lot of similarity. And if you like the XM18, especially if you like the small, you might really, really enjoy that. And then let's throw the Stretch in here. This is the Stretch 2 straight spine. The reason I'm throwing it in here is this is basically the exact same size as a Para 2. And I just forgot to bring a Para 2, which I normally have. So I'm throwing this in to be a placeholder for the Para 2 because it's so close in size. And that should give people an idea of where this lands in terms of its overall size. Now, this holds up extremely well. I will say this, compared to all of those other knives, this has a lot of style. This has a lot of cool factor. It's a really compelling, really interesting design, and that's where this really, really shines. Of course, it's well made, but it's really in the design and the attention to detail that this knife shines. And I think Reate has done a great job here. I feel like a broken record saying this, so I'm going to say it again. I like when knives don't go too crazy with showing off what they can do, but they just do a really nice, well put together knife with enough detail, with enough visual interest that you look at it and go, wow, that's really cool, but not so much that it goes over the top. And I really think this knife nails that. I love the design. I think it's a great offering from Reate, exceptionally well built, gorgeous, usable. great high-end carry knife. I don't think there's much that could be improved on this other than those few little things that I hit on. And even as it stands, it's just a totally great knife. Highly, highly enjoyable. And it's, I hope you guys are able to pick up some of my excitement about this knife because I absolutely love it. And I think many of you would as well. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We will talk to you soon.